work one more example with combining like terms using distributive property. Also, just a reminder of vocabulary. When you have a number in front of a letter, that number is referred to as a coefficient. So it's a very important vocabulary to kind of pick up on. We'll talk about that more and more as we move into algebra. We'll talk about coefficients. So, when I look at this problem right here, we want to simplify this expression. And to simplify this expression, we want to remove the parentheses because, again, notice that you really can't add an n to a 3. Those aren't what we call like terms. So what we can do, though, is multiply through the parentheses. And again, I can use the rectangular model to do that. So I can kind of write that off to the side. I have a -7 on one edge, and the n and the 3 are the other edge of the rectangle. And I can partition that off into two smaller rectangles. And I can let this do the math for me. -7 times n is -7n. And -7 times 3 is a -21. So I can replace this with -7m minus 21. Notice also, if you want, you actually can just multiply through. You don't necessarily have to use the rectangular model. If you can just see that, you just got to multiply this to both of these terms. So -7 times an n is -7n. Get that a little bit cleaner. So it's going to be a -7n, and then -7 times a +3 is a -21, so we just write it like that. So remember, we have two terms, a -7n and a -21, but we can just write that as a subtraction problem. So I have a -8 times this expression, so I have a -8 times this piece, so we have a 1 and an 8m, make that other edge. So when I have this, notice how that negative kind of goes along with the 8. So I have a -8 times 1, gives me -8. -8 times 8m would be a -64m. So again, when I distribute, it's a good idea to bring the negative through there with you. So negative times a positive is going to be at -8, and -8 times a +8 is going to be then, oops, that's going to be actually a -64m. So I'll put a -64m there. Actually, let's make these both ends, actually. Let's make this more workable. So let's call this 1 plus 8n. And therefore, this would be a -64. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. It's like writing the problem down wrong. So this should be n's, not m's. So I should have a -64n. And this enables me to combine like terms now. And since these are like terms, notice again, I kind of keep the sign along with those terms. So I have a -7n and a -64n. And since those are like terms, what we really do is just focus on those coefficients. So -7 and a -64, that's going to give me a -71. So -71n. And then I can focus on this, a -28 and a -8. A -28 and a -8 would give me then a -29. So I have those two terms, a -71 and a -29, or we can also read that as -71 times n minus 29. So that would be what, again, is referred to as being simplified. So again, you don't have to necessarily use the rectangular model. You can just distribute and play it down this way. But if you need a nice organizer, I would encourage you to use that rectangular model just to kind of keep your thoughts together. Stay tuned.